Good morning, Year 3, and welcome to today's reading lesson. Today is the 25th of February, 2021, and we're going back to our skill of inferencing. I hope you had a lovely time coming up with all those different creative suites yesterday. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I loved looking at them, and I hope that you really practiced your skill of innovating. But today, let's go back to our skill of inferencing when reading. Okay, so the definition of the skill is to find evidence and use clues to understand about a text. Okay, I'll go over this again in a minute. And the question type that we're focusing on is to find and copy a word or phrase that suggests something, that tells you something, that gives you a little bit of information. In order to be successful in today's lesson, you need to underline the key information in the question. And I said, I'll come back to it. So combine your own knowledge and clues given in the text. So you need to think, what do you already know? This is just your background knowledge that you've gained over the years, okay? Things that you have learned from nursery, reception, year 1, year 2, things that you have learned at home. That is the knowledge that you're going to use, okay? And then finally, you're going to use evidence from the text in your answer. The really important thing that I would like to highlight is to underline key information in the question, okay? Because if we go back to this question, all right, which words suggest that the grandparents were very thin, okay? So I'm looking for 2 words. That's why it's got an S at the end. It's a plural. So I'm looking for a group of words and very thin, okay? So that's what I'm looking for, words and very thin, okay? So both words have to suggest that they're very thin. Okay, so you've got bony and skeletons. Okay, if something's bony, that means think about just like the bone of something. Think about your finger bone, or think about like a chicken bone that you might see. Okay, think about skeletons. Think about how skinny they are, right? When they've got no meat all around them. Okay, that's the background knowledge that you should be using. All right, then old. If you're very old, does that mean you're bony? Well, it doesn't quite, because you might not be bony if you're old. You might still be eating a lot of food. You might not be as skinny as people might think, okay? Then you've got 90. Well, again, just because you're 90 years old, it does not mean that you are very thin, all right? So we can already eliminate that question. Now, I know most people picked this one, shriveled and prunes. Now remember, prunes, as I said, were like really dried up plums, okay? And shriveled means you're really wrinkly, okay? But none of those words suggest to me that you could be very thin, because you could have really wrinkly fingers, but it does not mean that they're thin, okay? So the correct answer for that one, oops, I meant to cross that out, sorry. The correct answer for that one was actually bony and skeletons, okay? So I thought I'd just go over that question again, because quite a few of us did not get it. All right, so let's go on again with inferencing. Okay, I'm just going to show you another example of what inferencing might look at, where you have to use your background knowledge. It says, my baby sister picked up her vegetables and one by one threw them off her high chair and onto the floor. Okay, so right away that's telling you, okay, so she's a baby, she's little, she's sitting in a high chair, she's throwing her vegetables. Now, why would she be throwing her vegetables? This is where your knowledge comes in. Why would you throw vegetables on the floor if you were a baby? Okay, she kicked out her legs and giggled as they were quickly licked off the floor. Okay, so she's sitting in her high chair and she's giggling because the vegetables are being licked off the floor. Well, who could be doing that? When Mum came back into the room, she shouted at the dog to go away. Well, does that give us our answer to these questions? So why did the baby throw the vegetables onto the floor? Simple, maybe because she didn't want to eat them, okay? I know when I was younger, I did not want to eat my vegetables, okay? I don't know what I did with them, but I know I definitely did not want to eat them. So that could be a reason why she threw the vegetables onto the floor, okay? I'm using my background knowledge of when I was a child to help me answer this question. Why did Mum shout at the dog? Well, we talked about that, okay? They were being quickly licked off the floor. Now, I know adults probably wouldn't lick vegetables off the floor. I'm sure you probably wouldn't lick vegetables off the floor. So who could possibly be licking these vegetables off the floor? Well, it would have to be the dog, isn't it? So that's why mum would shout at the dog, because he's licking the floor, licking the vegetables. And finally, how did the baby feel when the vegetables were licked off the floor? Okay, so here's that word over there. You're going back to the text. She's giggling. She's kicking out her legs and she's giggling. Giggling means laughing. So how is she feeling as the dog has licked the vegetables off the floor? Well, probably really happy that he's done it, okay, and feeling a little bit excited, a little bit cheeky, okay. Another way that question could have been phrased is, what word suggests that the baby was happy, okay, and then you would go to giggled, because when you giggle, you're happy about something, okay, and this is the type of question we'll focus on today. Okay, let's continue with our story. Okay, so when we left, Grandpa Joe was about to tell us the story about the Indian prince, Prince Pondicherry. Prince Pondicherry wrote a letter to Mr. Willy Wonka, said Grandpa Joe, and asked him to come all the way out to India and build him a colossal palace entirely out of chocolate. Colossal means huge, massive, gigantic, big. Okay, we don't use that word big anymore, but that's what it means, really, really large. Okay. Did Mr. Wonka do it, Grandpa? He did indeed. And what a palace it was! It had 100 rooms, and everything was made of either dark or light chocolate. The bricks were chocolate, and the cement holding them together was chocolate, and the windows were chocolate, and all the walls and ceilings were made of chocolate, and so were the carpets, and the pictures, and the furniture, and the beds, and when you turned on the taps in the bathroom, hot chocolate came pouring out. Now that sounds like a dream palace to me, although I don't know if I really want to have a bath in hot chocolate, or I don't know if I want to brush my teeth with hot chocolate. Not sure about that. Okay. When it was all finished, Mr. Wonka said to Prince Pondicherry, I warn you, though, it won't last very long, so you'd better start eating it right away. Nonsense, shouted the prince. I'm not going to eat my palace. I'm not even going to nibble the staircase or lick the walls. I'm going to live in it. Okay, so here are the two inference questions that will be part of your assignment today. Okay, find and copy a phrase which suggests Prince Pondicherry was very rich. Use your background knowledge. Okay, if you were very rich, what would you do? What would you want if you had a lot of money? Okay, and question two, find and copy a phrase that tells you Mr. Wonka was vigilant. Okay, now vigilant is a word that means you're always alert, you're looking out for danger, you're very cautious, you're very careful. Okay, what phrase tells you that Mr. Wonka was very careful and cautious about things? Okay, so here is a picture of the palace that Mr. Wonka built. As you can see, it is completely made out of chocolate. And here is a picture of the prince. He's sitting in his chocolate palace on his chocolate throne. And you can see all the walls are made entirely out of chocolate, okay? No great accomplishment. I'm sure this must have taken them ages to build. But this is how amazing Mr. Wonka was, that he managed to create a palace entirely out of chocolate. Okay. But Mr. Wonka was right, of course, because soon after this, there came a very hot day with a boiling sun, and the whole palace began to melt, and it sank slowly to the ground, and the crazy prince, who was dozing, which means lightly sleeping, he was sleeping, in the living room at the time, woke up to find himself swimming around in a huge brown sticky lake of chocolate. So here you can see, here is a picture of his wife, and she's got that chocolate that's fallen onto her face. You can see her face. She's looking a bit surprised, like, what is going on? And here's the chocolate palace melting, falling down, breaking apart in that hot sun. Okay. Little Charlie sat very still on the edge of the bed, staring at his grandfather. Charlie's face was bright, and his eyes were stretched so wide you could see the whites all around. So look at my eyes right now. I mean, it's a little bit scary, but whites all around because my eyes are stretched. And what do I look like? I'm looking quite surprised, aren't I? Is all this really true? He asked. Or are you pulling my leg? Pulling my leg means, are you playing a joke? playing a prank on me? Are you trying to trick me? It's true, cried all four of the old people at once. Of course it's true. Ask anyone you like. Okay, so the question for this page is find and copy a phrase that suggests Charlie was surprised. Okay, now it's not pulling my leg because pulling my leg means that he's like, are you trying to fool me? Are you trying to play a prank on me? I'm looking for something else that suggests he was surprised. Right, last page. And I'll tell you something else that's true, said Grandpa Joe. And now he leaned closer to Charlie and lowered his voice to a soft, secret whisper. Nobody ever comes out. Out of where? Asked Charlie. And nobody ever goes in. In where? Cried Charlie. Wonka's factory, of course. Grandpa, what do you mean? I mean workers, Charlie. Workers? All factories, said Grandpa Joe, have workers streaming in and out of the gates in the mornings and evenings, except Wonka's. Have you ever seen a single person going into that place or coming out? Little Charlie looked slowly around at each of the four old faces, one after the other, and they all looked back at him. They were friendly, smiling faces, but they were also quite serious. There was no sign of joking or leg pulling on any of them. Well, have you? Asked Grandpa Joe. So the question for this page, find and copy a phrase that suggests the factory was busy. So it used to be busy. What phrase tells you the factory used to be busy? Now, nobody comes in, nobody comes out. But before that, what phrase tells you the factory was busy? Okay, sorry, this is the last page, not that one. I really don't know, Grandpa, stammered Charlie. Whenever I walk past the factory, the gates seem to be closed. Exactly, said Grandpa Joe. But there must be people working there. Not people, Charlie. Not ordinary people, anyway. Then who? Cried Charlie. Aha! That's it, you see. That's another of Mr. Willy Wonka's clevernesses. Charlie, dear, Mrs. Bucket called out from where she was standing by the door. It's time for bed. That's enough for tonight. But, Mother, I must hear. Tomorrow, my darling. That's right, said Grandpa Joe. I'll tell you the rest of it tomorrow evening. Okay, and on this page, find and copy a phrase which suggests Charlie wanted to know more about the factory. So he says something or does something that suggests to you he wants to know more about the factory. Okay? So those are your 5 questions that you have to answer on Teams. Now, do not worry if when you submit it, it says 0 out of 5, because I have not inputted a correct answer, because I would like to read what you say, because there are lots of different answers that you can have, okay? So you might word it a bit differently to what I word it. So I have not put any score on there. When you complete the quiz, you will probably get 0 out of 5, and then I will go back and I will add on your points. Okay, so do not worry. Those are your 5 questions. So you can go off and do it. But if you would like to stay with me, I am going to go over it again much slowly, and I'm going to explain to you how to find these answers. Okay, so keep watching the video only if you need extra help. But other than that, well done, Year 3. Thank you for joining the lesson. I hope you enjoyed the story of the Chocolate Palace, and I would like you to go and complete that now. Okay, so if you are still with me, I'm going to go over this again, and I am going to explain to you how to find the answers. So question 1 says, find and copy a phrase which suggests Prince Pondicherry was rich. So following my success criteria, I want to underline the words was rich, and it's a phrase, so I need to find more than one word. Now remember, if you're rich, if you've got a lot of money, what would you do with that money? Okay. I would probably buy lots of chocolate. I would probably buy a big house. I would probably buy lots of clothes. I would probably go on holiday. But what did Prince Pondicherry do that suggests to you that he's got a lot of money? Okay. What does he do that tells you he's got a lot of money? Okay. Prince Pondicherry wrote a letter to Mr. Willy Wonka. That doesn't tell me he's got a lot of money. He asked him to come all the way out to India. Now think about where England is and think about where India is. It's a very long journey. And build him a colossal palace entirely out of chocolate. So he wants Wonka to go all the way to India, but more importantly, he wants Wonka to build him a colossal palace entirely out of chocolate. Now, if I didn't have any money, would I be able to build this palace entirely out of chocolate? No. So telling us that he wants to build him a colossal palace entirely out of chocolate, that tells me that he has a lot of money to spend, okay? Because only people with a lot of money could probably build an entire palace out of chocolate. Okay? So, number 2, I highlighted that word vigilant, which means he's always on the alert. He's always cautious. He's always careful. He always is looking and warning people. Okay? So, which phrase tells us that Mr. Wonka was vigilant? Okay? So, you're looking for Mr. Wonka, and here we go. Okay, we found Mr. Wonka there. I warn you though, it won't last very long, so you'd better start eating it right away. Okay, he's warning him. If he's warning him, that means he knows something bad is going to happen. He knows danger is there. And as I said, vigilant means you're always on the lookout for danger. You're looking out to warn people. You're being extra careful. So the correct phrase would be, I warn you, though, because he's warning him that something's about to happen. Okay? Right. That's a picture of the palace. Now, on this page, find and copy a phrase that suggests Charlie was surprised. Now, remember, what happened when I did that phrase? Looks like I'm surprised, doesn't it? Okay? So, what did Charlie's face do that tells you he's surprised? It won't be in this paragraph over here, because this talks about how the palace was melting. So let's read this paragraph. Little Charlie sat very still on the edge of the bed, staring at his grandfather. While staring, you could stare at someone but not still be surprised. But Charlie's face was bright and his eyes were stretched so wide you could see the whites all around. So, eyes stretched so wide, that's telling me that someone is surprised. Okay, this is where your background knowledge comes in. So you have to imagine that you've seen someone's face with their eyes stretched so wide. What does that face tell you? Okay. Find and copy a phrase that suggests the factory was busy. Now remember, now nobody comes in, nobody goes out. But it used to be busy. I know the answer is not here, so I'm going to move on because this is talking about how no one goes in. All factories, said Grandpa Joe, have workers streaming in and out of the gates in mornings and evenings. Now, if workers are going in mornings and evenings, what does that tell you? Well, it tells you that it's really busy. It tells you there's a lot of people. Okay? So that's what you should be thinking. And finally, your last one. Find and copy a phrase which suggests Charlie wanted to know more about the factory. Okay, so if you really want to know something more, what would you do? What would you say? Again, over here, I'm skim reading it. This just has to do with the people working there. Okay, so Charlie, dear, Mrs. Bucket called out from where she was standing by the door. It's time for bed. That's enough for tonight. Okay, that doesn't tell us he wants to know more. But mother, I must hear. Oh, here we go. I must hear about it. He wants to know more. He must hear about it. Okay, so that phrase is telling me he wants to know more about the factory. Okay, so now that you have gone through the answers with me, you can go off and complete the assignment on Teams and then submit it. All right, so hopefully you enjoyed the story, and then tomorrow we will just do our comprehension skills, and then we are done for the week. So well done for doing so well so far. Keep up the good work.